Everyone thinks the Demon Hunters and KPop Demon Hunters are fantasy, but they really existed, and they were women. They danced, they sang, and they held back the dark. This is the real story. They don't tell you. This is Parallel Worlds.
Okay, so I want you to imagine a weapon that is just, well, it's impossibly rare. Like so incredibly rare that it depends on this perfect, precise alignment of the cosmos.
Right. The kind of alignment that basically never happens.
Exactly. We are talking about a master blacksmith who has to wait an entire human lifetime, like 60 full years of waiting, just for a single 1-hour window to even attempt to forge this thing.
And the pressure of that 1 hour is just, I mean, it's staggering.
It's unbelievable. If the fire isn't hot enough, or if the metal cracks, or I don't know, if the blacksmith just happens to get sick on that specific day, that's it. The window closes.
Yeah, he dies without ever actually making it.
Right. So you have the dedication, the patience, the sheer anxiety of that 1 hour. It's almost unimaginable. Now, I want you to take that exact same sacred, mathematically impossible weapon, and I want you to imagine it currently being sold as a glowing neon pink plastic toy.
It is quite the juxtaposition, isn't it?
It is wild. Just millions of screaming teenagers buying this thing at mall kiosks all around the world.
The sacred and the mass-produced just completely colliding right there in the toy aisle.
It's totally mind-bending. And yet, I mean, if you have been anywhere near a movie theater or a radio, or honestly just a teenager in the past year, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, absolutely. It's inescapable.
We are, of course, looking at the massive global footprint of K-pop Demon Hunters. I mean, we're talking about a movie that didn't just break the box office. It essentially rewired global pop culture.
It really did. It's a cultural juggernaut at this point.
You have these 3 girls in a fictional K-pop group, and they literally fight hordes of soul-eating demons using, like, the power of their singing voices. And it is just everywhere.
You really can't avoid it.
You can't. The catchy songs are inescapably stuck in your head. I know they're in mine. The merchandise is flying off the shelves. You know, the glowing swords, the monster figures, that iconic magic music shield that wraps around the entire planet in the 3rd act.
Yeah, and the immediate reaction for, well, the vast majority of audiences is to just marvel at the sheer inventiveness of it all.
Right. You look at it and think, wow, they made all this up.
Exactly. You look at the neon colors and those meticulously choreographed battles, and you assume this is the product of a highly paid Hollywood writer's room. Like, they just engineered the ultimate escapist fantasy.
Yeah, you assume it's pure fiction, like a brilliantly crafted, totally artificial product designed from the ground up just to sell movie tickets and concert tours and soundtracks.
It feels clean. It feels very contained.
Like a fantasy that starts and ends on the screen. But, and here's the part that nobody tells you, and the entire reason we are doing this today. When you actually scratch the surface of this movie, that assumption just completely collapses.
It really does. It falls apart instantly.
Because, wait, hold on. Because when I first saw our notes for this, I actually had to read them twice. You're telling me they didn't invent this stuff?
Almost none of it. I mean, the core mechanics of the magic, the glowing swords, the planetary barrier.
Warrior women themselves.
Yeah, even the very concept of fighting the unseen through musical performance. The filmmakers didn't pull these out of thin air.
That is just wow.
What you're watching on that screen is actually a modern, neon-drenched reskin of a 3,000-year-old, intensely real Korean spiritual tradition.
See, that fundamentally changes how you watch the film. We are sitting there looking at a blockbuster, stadium-rocking popcorn flick, and it turns out to be an ancient history lesson just hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. It's ancient history dressed up in high fashion and given a staggering special effects budget.
So for you listening right now, that is our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to pull back the curtain on the real magic and the real history woven into this massive blockbuster.
It's going to be a really fascinating journey.
We are going to explore the origins of the actual warrior priestesses who held the line against the darkness in the ancient world. We're going to unpack what might genuinely be the first ever concerts in human history.
And the connection there is just brilliant.
It is. And by the end of this, we are going to discover why the truth of this ancient history is actually stranger, deeper, and honestly infinitely more fascinating than the fiction you saw in the theater.
Because when you strip away the modern pop aesthetics, what you are fundamentally looking at is a story about human beings. People desperately trying to make sense of and survive the unseen world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the central trio. So in the film, we follow Rumi, Mira, and Zoe.
We're the modern heroes.
Yeah. Well, within the narrative, they are the modern girls holding the line. They are the cinematic demon hunters. But if they are just the fictional representation, who were the original women holding that line in the real world?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at a historical figure known as the Mudang.
The Mudang, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Mudang is the traditional Korean shaman.
Yeah.
And to truly grasp the significance of this role, I mean, we really have to emphasize the staggering scale of time we are dealing with here.
How far back are we talking?
This isn't a tradition from just a few centuries ago. This spiritual practice dates back roughly 3,000 years.
3 millennia. Wow, I'm just trying to wrap my head around that timeline because, I always associate traditional Korean history with Buddhism or like the rigid social structures of Confucianism.
And that's a very common association, but it's chronologically backward.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. The tradition of the Mudang vastly predates the arrival of Buddhism on the Korean peninsula. It predates the establishment of Confucianism by centuries.
That is wild.
So this isn't some minor offshoot or a fringe cult that popped up later on. This is the absolute bedrock. It is the original indigenous Korean faith.
But how does a completely indigenous folk tradition even survive that long? Because usually when massive, highly organized philosophies like Buddhism or strict Confucianism sweep into a region, they just completely pave over the older local beliefs.
They often do, yes.
Yeah.
But the Mudang survived because they fulfilled a deeply practical, immediate human need that abstract philosophy just couldn't always touch.
What kind of need?
They dealt with the visceral, terrifying realities of daily survival. Which actually brings us to a fascinating quote from the creator of the movie, Maggie Kang.
Oh, right.
Yeah, when she was discussing the real-world inspiration for making the movie's heroines an all-female trio, she said the historical reality of the Mudang was, quote, kind of perfect for the story they wanted to tell.
Kind of perfect. Let's interrogate that. Like, what makes a 3,000-year-old shamanic tradition perfect for a modern movie about a super powerful girl group?
Well, because historically, the vast majority of these Korean shamans, the most powerful spiritual figures in the entire culture, were women.
That is a staggering contradiction to think about.
It is an immense paradox. I mean,
Right.
as Korean society evolved, particularly later under the heavy influence of strict Neo-Confucianism, it became intensely male-dominated.
Right, very rigid.
Exactly. Societal roles were rigidly defined. Political power, economic power, familial authority, it was all heavily concentrated in the hands of men. Women were largely marginalized in the public sphere.
But wait, if men controlled the politics, the money, and the philosophy, why wouldn't they just take over the spiritual realm, too? Why leave the ultimate authority over life and death in the hands of women?
That is a crucial question. It seems that the spiritual realm, the domain of emotion, illness, and the chaotic unseen, was viewed almost as an extension of the domestic sphere. And that was the traditional domain of women.
Ah, I see.
The formal, orderly rites of ancestor worship, those became the domain of men under Confucianism. But when things went wrong, when those formal rites failed, or when chaos descended in the form of a sudden plague or a string of tragic deaths.
The orderly philosophy wasn't going to cut it.
Exactly. The orderly philosophy of men wasn't enough. They had to turn to the older, wilder, more visceral power. And that power belonged exclusively to the Mudang.
So you have this society where a woman might not have a voice in the government, but when a terrifying sickness sweeps through the village and nobody can stop it, the most powerful man in town has to basically knock on her door and beg for her help.
Precisely. She held a kind of authority that superseded the patriarchal rules entirely. They were the undisputed experts of the supernatural domain.
That is incredible.
And their authority was so absolute that it manifested in really fascinating ways, even down to how they dressed.
Yes. The wardrobe details from our sources are just incredible. Maggie Kang pointed out that during these intense rituals, the female shamans often wore male clothing.
They did, yes.
They would put on the garments of male officials or military generals while engaging with the spirit world, which is just such a cool detail.
It is a striking visual choice, and it serves a very specific psychological and spiritual function.
My initial thought was, well, why dress as a man if female power is the whole point? But the more I think about it, the more it feels like a form of psychological armor.
I mean,
Like, by putting on male clothing in a society that is obsessed with strict gender roles, the Mudang is basically announcing, I am stepping outside the rules of your society. She isn't just a woman anymore. She is transcending the binary entirely.
that is exactly the mechanism at play. When she steps into the ritual space wearing those clothes, she is signaling a departure from ordinary reality.
She becomes something else entirely.
Right. She's becoming a vessel. She is temporarily suspending the rules of a male-dominated society to wield a power that is, in essence, genderless and absolute.
So this whole concept we see in the movie, these young women stepping into a powerful, almost genderless warrior role, standing toe-to-toe with monsters, that is not some modern Hollywood girl boss trope invented in a boardroom to sell action figures.
No, not at all.
That is historical reality. That is how these women actually operated.
The film is heavily stylized, of course, but the underlying dynamic of female empowerment in the face of existential threats is completely historically accurate.
Okay, let's talk about what that existential threat actually looks like. What was the literal job description of a Mudang?
It's quite different from what we see on screen.
Right, because in the movie, Rumi and her friends are shooting neon energy blasts out of their microphones, and obviously the historical figures weren't doing that.
Sadly, no neon energy blasts in ancient Korea.
So if I'm a villager 2,000 years ago, what am I actually hiring a Mudang to do?
The most accurate way to conceptualize their role is to view them as a living doorway.
A living doorway. I love that phrasing.
Yes. They were the bridge, the literal threshold between the human world and the spirit world. You didn't casually drop in on a Mudang for, like, everyday advice.
It wasn't a casual therapy session.
No, you sought them out in times of severe, inexplicable crisis. If crops were failing mysteriously, if a child fell suddenly ill with a disease no one understood, or if a string of bad luck was just destroying a family.
So they were basically spiritual detectives.
Exactly. Their job wasn't just to offer a generic prayer. They had to investigate the unseen reality. They had to diagnose the specific spiritual root cause of the physical suffering and then negotiate a solution.
Like finding out who you accidentally made mad.
Precisely. Which angry ancestor was causing the illness? Which nature spirit had been offended? Once they found the cause, they had to open that doorway and mediate a peace treaty.
So when you are sitting in the theater and you watch these three characters physically place themselves between innocent people and a horde of dangerous demons, you are watching a dynamic that genuinely existed.
It's grounded in real cultural practice.
Korea literally had generations of women standing on that exact metaphorical threshold for millennia. It's crazy.
It really is the historical anchor that gives the film its emotional weight.
Okay, that leads to the most important mechanical question of this whole deep dive. If you are a spiritual detective and you need to negotiate with the other side, how do you actually open that doorway?
But you can't just knock.
Right, you can't just knock. And they didn't do it by sitting in a silent room meditating either. Which brings us to the core conceit of the movie. The use of music as magic.
This is where the adaptation from ancient history to modern cinema is just at its most brilliant.
When audiences watch K-pop Demon Hunters, they see the girls fighting demons by singing. They're executing these complex, high-energy dance routines, and their magical power seems to come directly from the rhythm, the vocals, and the sheer energy of the crowd screaming for them.
And I think 99% of the audience assumes that's just a cynical marketing gimmick.
Oh, totally. It's the most natural assumption in the world. You make a movie about K-pop, you naturally use K-pop songs to fight the bad guys. It feels like a very clever way to ensure the soundtrack goes platinum.
Exactly. How do we sell more albums? Make the songs double as laser beams.
All right, but that assumption completely misses the reality.
It entirely misses the fact that the inspiration for this musical magic system wasn't modern pop music at all. It was an incredibly ancient, deeply traditional Korean shamanic ritual known as the gut.
The gut, spelled G-U-T or sometimes K-U-T.
Correct. This is the authentic central ceremony performed by the Mudang. And if we really want to understand how it inspired the film, we have to deconstruct what actually happens during a gut.
It's not a quiet prayer.
It is not what most Western audiences picture when they hear the word ritual.
Walk us through it. Like if we travel back in time and attend a gut in a rural village, what are our senses actually experiencing?
You are going to be hit with an absolute sensory overload. It is the furthest thing imaginable from sitting in a quiet, solemn church pew.
So it's loud.
A gut is incredibly loud. It is driven by large, pounding drums that create a rhythm you could literally feel vibrating in your chest. Alongside the drums, there are cymbals, gongs, and these really piercing wind instruments.
And what is the Mudang doing during all of this? Is she just standing there?
She is not standing still at all. She is engaged in intense, continuous dancing. She is spinning, jumping, and chanting rhythmically.
And the costumes.
Visually, it is dazzling. She wears elaborate, vibrantly colored costumes that catch the eye and add to the overwhelming spectacle of the whole moment.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back on this a little bit because logically this seems incredibly dangerous.
In what way?
Why would anyone risk going into a trance like that? I mean, pushing your body to the absolute limit, spinning in circles for hours while massive drums pound in your ears, it sounds like a recipe for a heart attack.
It is extremely physically demanding.
Right. If the goal is just to talk to a spirit, why the extreme physical trauma?
That is a crucial question, and it gets to the heart of how trance states operate neurologically and psychologically. The physical exhaustion and the overwhelming acoustic input are not just for entertainment.
They aren't just putting on a show.
No, they're the mechanism of the magic itself.
How so?
Well, the conscious human mind is very good at maintaining boundaries. To communicate with the spirit world, the Mudang believes she must bypass that conscious mind entirely.
Oh, so that makes sense.
So the pounding, repetitive rhythm of the drums essentially acts as a neurological override. It begins to sync with her brainwaves.
Oh.
Combine that intense auditory driving with severe physical exhaustion from the dancing, and her conscious defenses begin to collapse. The physical trauma is literally the key that unlocks the door to the trance state.
Wow. So the music isn't just background noise to set the mood. The music is the literal tool she uses to pry her own mind open.
Exactly. It is only when she is pushed to that absolute physical limit inside that deafening rhythm that she is believed to gain her spiritual power and connect with the other side.
That makes Maggie Kang's perspective on this so profound. I mean, she looked at this intense, exhausting, sensory overload ritual.
And she made a direct connection to the modern world.
Yes. She noted that the gut was, in many ways, ancient Korea's first form of a concert.
It's a brilliant observation.
Think about that parallel for a second. For everyone listening, think about the psychology of going to a massive stadium concert today.
It's overwhelming.
The bass is so loud it rearranges your internal organs. The light show is blinding. You are surrounded by thousands of people, all screaming the exact same words, all vibrating at the exact same frequency.
You lose your sense of individual self.
Exactly. You become part of this massive collective energy. It feels transcendent. It feels like magic.
The psychological mechanism is remarkably similar to the ancient ritual. It is a structured environment designed to overwhelm the senses and induce a feeling of connection to something larger than oneself.
And the creators of K-Pop Demon Hunters just looked at that modern, visceral feeling of a stadium concert, looked at a 3,000-year-old shamanic ritual, and realized they were looking at the exact same human phenomenon.
They absolutely did.
They took the underlying psychology of why humans gather to make loud music, and they weaponized it for cinema. They elevated it to a literal superpower.
It is a brilliant synthesis. It validates the modern pop experience by grounding it in ancient human psychology.
So in the movie, this ultimate stadium concert, this massive magical performance power is something very specific. The entire climax of the film revolves around the girls singing to power up a colossal glowing shield that wraps around the world to protect humanity.
Right, the planetary barrier.
They call it the Honmoon. Let's unpack the Honmoon, because this brings us to how the movie adapts the magic of the gut into a literal shield and the massive philosophical difference between the two.
The word Honmoon itself is very revealing.
What does it actually translate to in the sources?
In the context of the sources, Honmoon translates to soul gate or spirit gate.
A gate, a doorway, which takes us right back to the original job description of the Mudang standing at the threshold.
Precisely. She is the gatekeeper.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the movie pulls a massive bait and switch.
A very Hollywood bait and switch.
They take the concept of the soul gate and the ritual of the gut, and they flip the fundamental philosophy entirely upside down for the sake of the plot.
It's a fascinating look at how modern storytelling demands different structures than ancient survival.
How so?
Well, in the film, the gut, the concert, is used to construct a barrier. The Honmoon is an impenetrable wall. Its singular purpose is to keep the demons out of the human world. It is a defensive force field.
Right. The monsters crash against the neon force field and just disintegrate. It's very visually satisfying for an action movie. But in the real-world history of the Mudang,
In traditional Korean shamanism, a gut was never, ever about building a wall. It was entirely about building a bridge.
wait, if a spirit is causing a plague in your village, why on earth would you build a bridge to invite it closer? Wouldn't a wall be exactly what you want?
That is exactly how a modern mind approaches conflict. But we have to adjust our worldview to understand this.
Okay. Adjusted how?
In the ancient animistic framework, the unseen world isn't an alien invading force that you can just block out. The spirits are your ancestors. They are the spirits of the mountains, the rivers, the weather.
They are part of the world around you.
Exactly. You cannot build a wall against nature, and you cannot wall off your own lineage.
Ah. So they aren't demons in the Hollywood sense. They are part of the ecosystem.
Exactly. If there is suffering in the village, it isn't because an evil force has breached a wall. It is because the relationship between the human world and the spirit world had become fractured or unbalanced.
So someone messed up.
Basically, yes. Perhaps an ancestor was buried improperly and is angry. Perhaps a nature spirit was offended by someone cutting down a sacred tree. The gut is performed to invite that spirit in, to listen to its grievances, and to negotiate a settlement.
It's diplomacy. Real shamanism was about harmony and mediation.
It was a mechanism for restoring balance to a connected universe.
And the movie just completely throws that out the window. The movie heroes are literally trying to hold the door shut. And I think that little change tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the difference between ancient folk religion and modern blockbuster cinema.
It really highlights a fundamental shift in how we narrativize our problems.
Ancient people dealing with starvation or disease knew they couldn't just punch the weather in the face. They had to figure out how to live with it, how to appease it. So their rituals are built on negotiation.
But we, as a modern audience,
Sitting in an air-conditioned theater, we demand a boss fight. We want binary conflict. We want a clear, unambiguous enemy that we can lock out or blow up with a laser beam.
we prefer the simplicity of a wall. Inside the wall is good and safe. Outside the wall is evil and dangerous.
It's just so much easier to process.
The ancient Mudang operated in a world of complex, deeply intertwined relationships where such binaries just didn't exist.
It's brilliant from a screenwriting perspective, right? You need an action climax, but it completely inverts the philosophy of the magic. They kept the aesthetics of the trance, but they weaponized it.
They turned mediation into combat.
Okay, let's pivot from the grand planetary concepts and zoom in on the physical details, because the real history buried in this movie isn't just in the massive plot points, it is hidden in the tiniest props and the smallest character beats.
The production design and the lore integration are remarkably detailed.
Let's look at the weapons. Rumi is the lead singer, but when the demons break through, she wields this incredible glowing longsword.
This very striking weapon.
On the surface, it looks like a standard, highly marketable sci-fi weapon. But the sword has a specific name in the lore of the film.
It is identified as a sanjam.
The Sanjam, the sword of four tigers.
Yes. And historically, the sanjam was not primarily a weapon of war meant for the battlefield.
It wasn't for fighting.
No, it was a deeply sacred ritual object believed to possess immense spiritual power to drive away evil and disaster.
But the truly insane part of this is the manufacturing process. The conditions required to forge a real Sanjam are almost mathematically impossible.
They require a level of astrological and temporal precision that borders on the obsessive.
How specific are we talking?
According to the traditional records, a true Sanjam could only be forged when the cosmos perfectly aligned with the tiger in the Chinese zodiac. It had to be forged during the year of the tiger, the month of the tiger, the day of the tiger, and specifically within the 2-hour window of the hour of the tiger.
Let's break that down logistically for a second. How is that even practical? That specific alignment of year, month, day, and hour only happens once every 60 years.
That is correct.
So you are a master blacksmith. You spend decades learning how to fold steel, how to manage the forge, how to perfect your craft. And you realize that the most important, most powerful object you will ever create can only be attempted for a single 2-hour window in your entire life.
It is a singular, lifelong gamble.
What if it's pouring rain that day and the fires won't catch? What if the steel shatters?
If you fail, you will likely be dead before the next window opens 60 years later.
The pressure must have been unbelievable. But why design a process so prone to failure? Why not just bless a sword on a Tuesday and call it a day?
Because in ancient belief systems, rarity and sacrifice are intrinsically linked to power. The sword isn't powerful despite being nearly impossible to make. It is powerful because it is nearly impossible to make.
Ah, I see. The effort is the point.
The sheer human patience, the decades of waiting, the cosmological alignment, all of that energy and intent is believed to be folded into the steel. The difficulty is the magic.
So because of this extreme rarity, I have to assume you couldn't just buy one of these at the local market.
Absolutely not. Due to the immense difficulty of their creation, the Sanjum was historically reserved for only two types of people: the most elite, powerful shamans, and royalty.
Which makes it the most perfect character prop in the entire movie.
It is a masterful piece of visual storytelling.
Think about who Rumi is. In the context of the story, she is a Mudang, a demon hunter, but she is also the lead singer of the most famous K-pop group on the planet.
She is a cultural icon.
She is literally modern royalty. She sits at the exact intersection of spiritual warrior and pop princess, so of course she is the one wielding the sword of kings and shamans. The prop itself validates her status.
It operates simultaneously on the level of historical accuracy and modern character development.
And the hidden details don't stop with the sword. Let's talk about her backup. Rumi doesn't fight alone. She is accompanied by two glowing spirit animals.
Yeah, her companions.
A tiger and a magpie. Now, if you are a teenager watching this, you'd probably just think, cool, glowing animals, tigers have claws, birds can fly, good video game mechanics. But where do these specific animals come from?
They're lifted directly from a very famous motif in minhwa.
Minhwa being traditional Korean folk art, right?
Folk paintings created by commoners, often to decorate their homes and bring good fortune. And one of the most enduring, iconic images in minhwa is the pairing of the tiger and the magpie.
Okay, let's break down the symbology here. To a peasant painting this on their wall 300 years ago, what do these two animals represent?
They have very distinct complementary roles. The magpie is universally seen as a messenger. It is the bringer of good news, but crucially, it is also a scout or lookout.
It announces things.
Exactly. It is the creature that announces that something significant is arriving. The tiger, conversely, represents brute strength and fierce protection. It is the muscular guardian spirit that wards off evil and bad luck.
So you have the scout and the muscle, and the filmmakers just took that static two-dimensional painting and hard-coded it directly into the screenplay as a dynamic mechanic.
It's an incredibly clever adaptation.
Think about how it plays out on screen. Whenever the invisible demons are approaching, long before the human characters can see them, what happens? You hear the sharp cry of the spirit magpie.
It acts as an early warning alarm system.
Yes, and the moment the threat is revealed, the spirit tiger materializes to physically defend Rumi. They turned a centuries-old superstition into a literal spiritual motion detector.
They translated cultural symbolism into kinetic action.
Yeah.
If you don't know the folklore, it just functions as a neat fantasy element.
But if you do know the culture,
You realize you are watching a classic painting come to life to fight demons. It rewards cultural literacy.
it just adds this incredible layer of depth. It proves that this isn't just a generic fantasy movie with a K-pop skin. It is deeply structurally Korean.
It's woven into the very fabric of the story.
But for this final section of our deep dive, I want to take a massive step back. We've been looking intensely at Korea. The Mudang, the gut, the Sanjum, the art. But the fundamental concept of the Mudang, a human being who crosses over to the spirit world using a trance, that phenomenon was not happening in a vacuum.
No, it was not. And this is perhaps the most profound realization of our entire discussion today.
Really?
How so?
Well, the idea of a specialized individual who can purposefully alter their consciousness to negotiate with unseen forces, that is a universally recognized humo concept.
Yeah.
It appears in cultures scattered across the entire globe, completely isolated from one another.
It's like it is hardwired into our collective operating system. Every single culture at some point realizes they need a doorway person. Exactly. The human need to mediate the unknown is universal. In fact, anthropologists use a single specific term to categorize these figures across all different cultures. They refer to them universally as shamans.
And here's a detail from our sources that genuinely surprised me. When we use scientific or anthropological terms in English, they almost always come from Greek or Latin, but the word shaman doesn't. Where does it actually originate?
The term shaman originates from the Tungusic peoples of Siberia.
Siberia.
Yes, it was their specific, localized word for their spiritual mediators. When early anthropologists encountered similar figures worldwide, they simply adopted the Tungusic word as the universal umbrella term.
So we have this universal human idea, the person who touches the spirit world, the person who falls into a trance to heal the sick. And this is where the story takes a very dark turn. How the world treated those doorway people varied wildly depending on where they happened to live.
If we look at the historical trajectory, the contrast is deeply unsettling. Let's compare the fate of the Mudang in Korea to the fate of similar women in Europe.
Okay, let's go to Europe. What happens there?
In Europe, as the centuries passed, religious power became intensely centralized. The organized church solidified its absolute grip on societal truth and authority.
Right. There was one official narrative.
And as that rigid hierarchy took hold, women who practice folk healing, women who claim to have a direct line to the supernatural, women who stood outside the official sanctioned boundaries of the church, they became a threat to the centralized power structure.
They weren't seen as useful mediators anymore. They were branded as witches.
Exactly. They were labeled as heretics, dangerous subversives who were consorting with evil.
And we know exactly how that played out. It was a campaign of terror, the witch hunts, accusations, torture, public executions, burning at the stake.
It was a systematic annihilation of the female mystic.
Oh, yeah.
And it creates a devastating historical parallel for us to analyze. Because fundamentally, stripped of geography, we are looking at the exact same human phenomenon.
Let's really emphasize this contrast for you listening, because it is purely a result of shifting power dynamics. You have this core human idea, a woman who claims she can see what ordinary people can't.
Yes.
A woman who says, I can heal your child with this ritual, or I can speak to the spirits of the land.
The raw psychological and sociological claim is identical in both places.
Right, but look at the divergence in outcomes. In ancient Korea, because the folk religion was decentralized and necessary for survival, that woman is vital. She becomes the highly respected Mudang.
She is an essential part of the community.
When the crops fail, the village elders knock on her door. She is integrated into the very fabric of their survival. But in Europe, that exact same woman, making the exact same claims about the unseen world, is pushed to the margins.
She is feared.
She is hunted down by the authorities, and she is destroyed.
Same idea. Entirely opposite destinies. One culture reveres the mystical woman as a necessary bridge. The other culture annihilates her as a threat to order.
It's just so tragic.
It speaks volumes about how different societies handle the unknown, and crucially, how they handle female power that exists outside of traditional male-dominated hierarchies.
And that profound historical tragedy, that contrast, is the ultimate thematic payoff of everything we've unpacked today. That is the secret reason why K-Pop Demon Hunters hit so hard, and why it resonated globally.
The emotional resonance of the film is entirely built on that historical foundation.
Whether the audience sitting in the theater consciously knows this history of witch hunts and shamans or not, I think we feel it in our bones.
We definitely do.
Because what is the movie fundamentally doing? It is taking this ancient universal figure, the woman who stands between worlds, the woman who, for centuries, depending entirely on where she was born, was either pushed into the shadows, feared, marginalized as society modernized, or literally set on fire.
And the movie takes her, and it finally, unapologetically, puts her on the biggest stage in the entire world.
It elevates her from the margins to the center of the universe. It gives her a sword forged from the stars. It gives her a soundtrack that the whole world is singing, and it makes her the undisputed hero, adored by millions.
It's complete reversal of history.
The warrior priestess, the witch, the Mudang, she finally gets to be the superstar she always was. It is a massive cinematic vindication.
It is exactly that. It is the vindication of the female mystic. After centuries of complex history, alternating between reverence and brutal persecution, she is brought into the glaring, joyful light of modern pop culture and celebrated without caveat.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's summarize the massive journey we just took. We started by looking at a catchy, colorful movie about a girl group fighting monsters.
And we ended up in ancient history.
Right. By pulling back the curtain, we uncovered 3,000-year-old spiritual traditions that predated massive global religions. We learned about women who donned the armor of genderlessness and danced themselves into sheer neurological exhaustion just to protect their communities from the unknown.
It's an incredible legacy.
We discovered that the sensory overload of a modern stadium concert is actually a straight line back to ancient Korea's first musical rituals. We analyzed the philosophical shift from building spiritual bridges to building cinematic walls.
And the sword that takes 60 years to forge?
We found out about a sword that demands a lifetime of waiting for a single hour of forging. And we talked about the global vindication of the marginalized mystic.
The fundamental takeaway of this deep dive is that K-Pop Demon Hunters did not invent Korean magic.
Yeah.
Didn't need to invent anything. The magic, the mechanics, the power, it was already there.
Exactly. It just reminded the entire world that it was always there. It was just waiting patiently in the shadows for its encore. And it got the most massive, neon-lit, bass-dropping encore in cinematic history.
The film is a remarkably rich tapestry, provided you know how to look at it.
So for you listening right now, here's my direct challenge to you. The next time you are driving and you hear one of those incredibly catchy songs stuck in your head, or the next time you sit down to rewatch the movie on a Friday night, I want you to look past the special effects.
See what's really there.
Think about how many of these hidden historical layers you completely missed the first time. Think about the blacksmith waiting 60 years to strike the steel. Think about the magpie crying out a warning in the dark.
Think about the Mudang.
Think about the ancient Mudang standing at the doorway, exhausted and powerful. It truly is a masterpiece of hidden history. And I want to leave you with one final thought. Something to just mull over on your own after we sign off today.
What's that?
We spent a lot of time talking about how the ancient Mudang used their massive, loud, pounding musical rituals to intentionally build a bridge to the spirit world. They used sensory overload to open a door in their minds.
It's right.
And today, we still use massive stadium concerts to create that exact same overwhelming energy. The pounding bass, the blinding lights, the screaming crowd, it makes you wonder.
It really does.
If the psychological and neurological mechanics are exactly the same now as they were 3,000 years ago, who or what are we unconsciously trying to open a door to when we all stand shoulder to shoulder and sing together in the dark? Keep looking beneath the surface, everyone, and stay curious.